Hello, Renegade marketers. Welcome to Renegade Marketers Unite, the top-rated podcast for B2B CMOs and other marketing-obsessed individuals. Alrighty, folks, you're about to listen to a bonus huddle, a specially curated huddle that we run once a month with experts sharing their insights into the topics that are most important to our B2B CMO community. The expert at this particular huddle was Lindsay Pedersen, brand strategist and best-selling author of Forging an Ironclad Brand, which I highly recommend and reference in my book, which is what we cover during this show. It's illuminating and incredibly insightful for CMOs who are thinking about brand, which is something they should be thinking about all the time, but gets occasionally hard to think about when the cries for demand are everyday and relentless. Anyway, let's get to it. I'm thrilled to introduce Lindsay Pedersen, the author of Forging Ironclad Brands, a book I read with great care and referenced multiple times in my own book. Lindsay also runs a boutique branding firm called Ironclad Brand Strategy. So welcome, Lindsay, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Drew. It's good to be here.
How are you and where are you?
Thanks for asking that. I'm pretty good. I'm in Seattle and we have had a lot of smoky skies for the last few weeks. And this morning there was no smoke and I got to go for a run. So I'm really happy right now.
Yeah, it's been a very weird weather year for your part of the country.
It has, yeah.
So I revisited your LinkedIn profile and was reminded that you spent 5.5 years at Clorox in one of the top packaged goods orgs in the world. And I'm just curious, how foundational was that experience to your understanding of brand?
Working at Clorox, and I suppose this would be the case with any consumer packaged goods company, really made me respect brand because if you think about what we sell at Clorox, whether it's cat litter or bleach or Kingsford charcoal, the products themselves are not really differentiated from the rest of the market. In some cases, they're actually literally the exact same product. Like Clorox bleach, for example, by federal law, the EPA regulates that it's the same as private label bleach, 6% sodium hypochlorite, 94% water. So with products that themselves inherently are not different, the way that you command a healthy margin by having pricing that isn't commoditized is through brand. And so companies like Clorox and Nestle and Procter & Gamble and Unilever have become really good. It actually is the core competency of the company to develop distinctive brand identities for these businesses, because if they don't succeed. It's sort of a Darwinistic environment. So it's totally foundational. But the funny thing is that the principles of creating a sharp, memorable, resonant brand operate regardless of what category you're in. It's just that it's sort of the crucible in consumer packaged goods. You have to be good at it in consumer packaged goods, but it helps in any environment.
Right. Whereas in B2B brands can be really successful sometimes just by having really good sales forces, right? For example, whereas the product is the sales force in a sense in packaged goods. I mean, it has to represent. And interestingly, in that scenario, brand equals margin, right? Because it's just the margin that you get over generics. But before we go any further, we should probably define what you mean by brand.
So brand is the meaning that a company owns inside the brain of their audience. It's like the real estate, like the literal, physical, neurological real estate that is occupied inside the head of their audience, what they mean to their audience. That's what brand is. It's what a company stands for to their audience. That meaning can span from highly functional, rational benefits to highly emotional benefits. It's whatever has been filled up by the company. And all companies, all businesses have a brand. It's just that some are more value creating than others.
So it's perception. And the stronger the perception, in theory, the stronger the value of that brand. It's funny, and again, packaged goods was a formidable period of my sort of marketing education. I worked on Listerine and we competed with Procter & Gamble and Scope, but Procter & Gamble, the way I really got to understand positioning was through this one brand, Gain Detergent. and their positioning was smell as proof of clean.
Yep.
And I just thought the genius of that moment was, smell. Like, that's a weird thing. We smell our clothes, and that's how we know they're not looking at it, but smell. And so I don't know if that sparks any thoughts for your mind, but did you have an aha moment when you were at Clorox working on any of those brands?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. The laundry category, I love talking about laundry because it's so, most of us do laundry, and these categories they're such mature categories. There's pretty much 100% household penetration in North America, right? So there's not a land grab yet because there's not new consumers for the most part. What's interesting to me, there's so many cool things about that anecdote about Gain. The thing that strikes me the most is how simple it is. They don't say we're both efficacious and we smell good. They're not, we're both good for the planet and we have a wonderful fragrance. They're not, we're the cheapest. It's just one thing, and it's scent. With a category that's as mature as laundry detergent, most brands can draft from the category benefit. Most people kind of assume if it's a laundry detergent, it's going to clean your clothes. It's pretty bold to step away from that and not play that game and just let the wins allow them to benefit from the category benefit of cleaning, and instead choose something simple and memorable. So simple and so memorable, and this is a critical thing about powerful brands, that it requires very few cognitive calories from their audience to remember it, right? So the more simple it is, the easier to remember it is, and the less effort the audience needs in order to retain it. And so it stays in your head more than a company that gives you 5 things to remember about it.
So simplicity, clarity. And I'm going to point out one other thing, and this is sort of where your book and my book are different and importantly different. And you talk about positioning and getting there as the springboard for the creative. And what smell as proof of clean is not an ad statement. It is something that it's a guiding principle that you then, when you create an ad or you create a program, it's always about somewhere or another, in a Gain ad, you'll see someone smelling the clothes, right? In my book, at least, I get to sort of the purpose-driven story statement and the 8 words that kind of clarify it. Clearly, the positioning and this notion of brand is a more powerful, universal, and something that can have staying power for a long time, right? They've never wavered from that.
That's right. That's right. Done well, it doesn't need to change unless there's something meaningful that changes about their market. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think you started to reference this with positioning and branding. I'm using them kind of synonymously here. What works in your favor is when you first figure out what it is, just what's the idea. Forget about the words. Don't try to be too cute or clever with the words. Get really sharp with the idea. During the creative process, use cute words. But what often happens when those 2 things are conflated, when you try to do strategy and creative or copy at the same time, is you get enamored with a cute creative idea that actually isn't differentiated or doesn't matter to the customer. So I really encourage people from kind of a process standpoint to sequence that. First do the strategy and then later do the creative. By the way, the creative will evolve. Volvo's positioning of safety has been their positioning since the mid-1920s, but they've used hundreds, if not thousands, of sets of copy and creative to bring that to life, to matter more with, whatever is the zeitgeist when they're launching that. But what accrues for the customer, the reason I bet everybody who's joining us right now knows that Volvo equals safety, the reason for that is they don't change the positioning. They let the words change to fit whatever is happening at the time, and especially in the awareness journey of their audience. They don't have to use the word safety explicitly now the way that maybe they did in the 1920s, but not changing, not switching all over the place, because changing requires cognitive calories from your audience, and the name of the game is to minimize cognitive calories from the audience.
Minimize cognitive calories. Okay. I want to come back to that notion, but we have an audience of B2B CMOs, many of whom are selling complex and costly solutions to a buying committee. Not an individual is going to walk into a grocery store or go onto Amazon and buy it. Part of this exercise today is helping them sort of bridge the gap from the just awesome clarity, simplicity of some of the packaged goods products that we've described to their B2B positioning challenges?
It's one of the cool things about being a marketer for B2B is that simply by using these principles, even if you don't go to the same extent, and I probably wouldn't even recommend that you do go to the same extent as like Coke or Pepsi might go to with their branding, even if you only use these principles a little bit, you're probably already running circles around your competitors who think that brand is only for B2C companies. It already is your competitive advantage if you're using it at all. It's, kind of don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Using these principles, it is already going to make you stand out because so few B2B companies do this or do it well, or they relegate it to, a marketing tactic versus kind of an overarching positioning platform.
And so let's get to these principles then. So we're making sure we've talked about simplicity and clarity, and we've talked about, at least in the case of Gain, there's some emotional headspace in smell from a B2B. And again, is there a brand that can illustrate what we're talking about here?
I consider the economic reason for brand is to command attention, cognitive attention. So memory, the awareness. So in some ways, if you can think of a B2B brand, then it probably is a valuable brand. They've probably done a good job. Otherwise, you wouldn't remember it, to be fair, like stepping out of your space, because of course you are going to know the brands in your space. But if you can think of a B2B brand that you think is a good brand, it probably is a good brand just because you've thought of it, because that's the most scarce resource that our audience has is attention. I can think of some great B2B brands right now, like Slack, Salesforce. I've worked with a company called Avalara, great brands, insofar as their audience has attention for them. My teenage kids have never heard of some of these B2B brands, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good brand because they're not their audience. They don't need to capture the cognitive attention of everybody, just of the people who may become economic buyers. That's how I think what is a good B2B brand. It's the same thing that would make a good B2C brand. There is salience in the mind of the audience, so that they're more likely to consider it and ultimately buy it. So the purpose of all of this is to make it easier for your customer to buy ultimately. And before they buy, they have to become aware of it. They have to know what the heck it is. And in order to know what the heck it is, you have to, they're more likely to learn about you if you make it easy to learn about you. And that's why it's so useful to be simple and singular and therefore memorable.
Interesting. A lot of thoughts going through my mind. One is the first stop is awareness. If they're not aware of you, you're not going to get on the list. It's pretty simple. But then you use the term salience, which is a term that really, very much is part of the packaged goods world. It's like, what are you known for? It's not just that they know Listerine, but what do they know you for?
Yeah.
And if you are lucky enough to be known for something or aware, then we get to this notion of salience. I think a lot of the brands, the companies here, many of them are in the we need more awareness space.
Yeah.
And then others are known for one thing, but want to be known for more.
Right.
And so that gets at the issue of this simplicity challenge that brands face. And you mentioned Salesforce. So Salesforce, everybody kind of knows as a CRM, that's a place to start. But Salesforce is everything in the marketing automation, everything, right? Help us deal with this sort of challenge of keeping it simple on the highest level, but still sort of adding saliency as you add products and you add markets and you add geographies. And that was probably 10 questions. So pick one of them.
So, okay. Okay. So I think, remember, Salesforce has been around for 21 years, I want to say 22 years. They haven't always been about all of these things. They started as, we're going to be the CRM that feels like Amazon. That's as easy as Amazon. They were that for years before they extended their product lines. So to kind of focus on the simplicity of right now, they're about ease. They're about ease within CRM. And once you've established that, once you've won trust and credibility with one thing, as long as you're creating things that are another expression of that one thing, ease, you have permission do that, or your customers will likely give you permission to do that. So Volvo is probably not going to launch a motorcycle product because it would erode their promise of safety, but they might launch a minivan. So it becomes the filter through which they consider their innovation roadmap. And in developing what you want to stand for, what you want that simple thing to be, you want it to be big enough, a big enough unmet need that there is room to grow, whether it's through product extensions or whether it's through tapping markets that otherwise wouldn't have considered purchasing this. So that's part of the decision of choosing what it is you're going to stand for. So with Salesforce, ease is just an enormous unmet need. It certainly was when they got started, and then they can spread from there. I think that the mistake people make is in being really literal about, well, ease in CRM, say, we own ease with CRM. Well, we can't go beyond CRM because we're only ease with CRM. If the customer gives you permission to expand beyond CRM and doesn't find that to be disingenuous or weird, then that's something to at least consider. That was one of your questions, Drew, but you had more and now I'm not remembering.
Well, no, but and then sparking a number of thoughts, because a lot of CMOs say, hey, we want to own a category. And it's not CRM, it's the next thing, right? Whatever that is. We're creating a new category and we want to be almost the Clorox of the bleach world, right?
Yep.
But what I feel like there's something different going on in what you're saying is you're not owning a category like CRM. What you want to own is some space in the brain that triggers they're easy, or, something that is less specific, but still a genuine promise.
Yeah, I love that. I haven't thought of it like that until you just said that it's the thing about owning a category, and that's actually maybe the majority of the companies we work with, that actually is what they're trying to do, to kind of start and own a new category. That is a great goal. And it also is probably more something that you relate to more than that your customer relates to. The customer isn't like, God, what I really want is for somebody to start and own a new category. So the way that I would sort of flip that, and I don't think I think that it's just a reframing, is try to own an unmet need, own a problem, as opposed to owning a category, because that the customer does have a lot of motivation to see you win with. And it may so be, that's just another way of saying, oh, we're going to own the blank category. So flipping it to be consumer meaningful. And by the way, they might not even know what you mean by category, right? Like if you think of it as what we're competing with isn't so much other businesses in this category. What we're competing with is the behavior that the customer is engaging with because they don't have our offering. Right. That's your competitor. And sometimes that's direct competitors, but usually it's not. If you're starting a new category, it's usually substitute behaviors.
Going back to what you just said earlier about making it easy to buy, if you go out to try to create a new category and I don't even know that there is this category, you haven't made it easier to buy. However, if you describe a problem that I'm having in real time, you're not worried about the category, you're just focused on the problem. I get it. If Brent Adamson were here with us, he would be echoing that on multiple levels, both in terms of making it easy to buy because customers have a buying problem. The other thing I just wanted to throw in there on category creation is the way I look at it is, don't think about creating a category, think about creating a community. And you've gotten there when people actually have a job description that involves your product.
Love it.
Right? Like data visualization for Tableau is a great example of that. But
wonderful. I love that. Yeah.
The problem was, I don't know how to share data in a way that people can understand it. That's the unmet need. To get there, you needed data visualizers. They built a community. Next thing you know, it's a category. Okay. A number of CMOs in the audience are in the process or about to embark on rebranding journeys. And one of the things you and I have talked about is why it's so important to have your CEO and your board buy in from the beginning. Can you talk about this and why it's so important?
Yes, I find this so fundamental to articulating a brand, whether it's a rebrand or the first time you're doing it. It goes back to brand is what you stand for to your audience. And the way that customers become aware of what it is you stand for, include things that go way beyond marketing, right? So there's like, the classic framework of the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. That's the way that positioning comes to life. And promotion is only one of those 4 things. So if a brand strategy is done under kind of one of the subtopics of positioning, so promotion, or even the entire marketing organization, or even when marketing owns product, it still is not all encompassing. And so it reads as inauthentic to the customer. So think of like AT&T wireless, really cool, fun marketing, great, expensive media. But if you're an AT&T customer, you might know that it is really incongruous with their marketing. And so
you mean the product experience, I think.
The product experience, maybe even, the place P of the 4 Ps, distribution, also not easy, not pleasant, not seamless, none of the things that's promised in the promotion. Ultimately, if the CEO, if the promise that you're putting out there doesn't deliver across all aspects of the customer experience, from product to price to place to promotion, then it's not a brand strategy. It just isn't. It's a marketing. It could be a really cool marketing campaign, but if the rest of the things that the customer experiences of the company aren't conveying that in a consistent and aligned way, then at best you've confused the audience, and at worst you're perceived as disingenuous, like AT&T wireless. The buck has to stop with whoever owns the P&L for all of those things. And in some companies, that is the CMO. Some companies, it's a general manager, depending on how the organization is set up. But the CEO usually is the one who provides air cover so that the CMO knows that his or her counterpart in product and the CFO are all rowing in the same direction with this brand idea. It simply isn't as powerful. It's not nearly as powerful if the CEO doesn't have the conviction and the buy-in and the energy, and frankly, the leadership courage to make trade-offs against this promise, even when it means less revenue this quarter. Can you imagine how tempting it would be for Volvo to launch a scooter when it's so hot right now? But when the CEO is like, no, that would be a trade-off against our most important asset, our brand safety, the CMO doesn't have to go to bat and say, hey, you're not allowed to do that. That would be breaking our promise. So it's sort of like making brand smaller than it really is by not allowing it to be a complete business strategy, really, that the CMO simply is probably the most direct beneficiary of. But everybody is a beneficiary of the brand strategy, not only marketing.
I summarize this with, if your CEO isn't on board, you're just going to be putting a fresh coat of paint on an old dilapidated barn. Nothing's really going to change. You're going to feel good about it. What we're really talking about with brand, little B brand is changing the logo and putting a new website on there with probably some new words and language. That's little B brand. Big B brand involves organizational change, because we're now making essentially a new promise that we have to deliver on to the marketplace. Is that a fair summary?
Exactly. And remember, back to the principle of minimize cognitive calories. A new name, a new logo, a new color, a new visual identity, even new words might cost cognitive calories from your audience, and they might be annoyed. So there should be some meat behind it. I mean, if it's only to have a fresh coat of paint, know that there's a cost to that, because you might have now confused your audience. It's actually really common for customers to be kind of irritated, or they're not even aware. They just have sort of a funny, like, ooh, I don't know about this company after all, because they just like, it's just like when a person like has a makeover and you're like, oh, like, so are they that or are they that? It kind of, it breeds a little bit of doubt. So I don't take that lightly. I actually think it's a really good idea to do a lot of the time, but just to make sure that you're taking into consideration the principle that the customer isn't like dying for you to create a new logo in almost any scenario. So what is it that the customer gets out of this rebrand? And are you doing the hard work to make it easier for them to perceive you and to think about you rather than harder?
It's funny, and I love that question. It's such a great question. What's a customer going to get out of it? What about employees? I mean, what's an employee going to get out of a rebrand?
Yeah, well, it's the same. It's the same principle of trust. And actually, I even think maybe we should pause on what do we mean by rebrand? Because even that word is kind of all over the place. Sometimes it actually just means, and probably usually when I hear that, it means a new visual identity. Sometimes it means a new name. If you mean a new positioning, like you actually are going to position differently, I would call it that. But to me, kind of the most wholesome reason to do a quote unquote rebrand is that you haven't really done it right to begin with. And so if you ask 10 employees, what does this company stand for? And you get 10 different answers, that is, number one, a very expensive state of affairs. I mean, your employees should know exactly what you stand for and should be saying the same thing. Number two, that's demoralizing for employees not to have a singular North Star. And number three, it's disengaging for them. So the promise, what that is, kind of that distilled version of what it is your company stands for, what you want to own inside the mind of your audience, that is going to galvanize employees as well as customers. And not doing it or not having kind of the guts to have a stake in the ground also erodes trust among employees who are just dying for you to tell them what it is this company is meant to do. That's what we human beings are, meaning-seeking creatures. We want to know, what is the meaning of being an employee in this company? And if you make us work really hard to figure out what that is not going to win over our hearts and minds. So it's the same human principles at work here, whether it's employees or whether it's customers.
So we've covered, you got to have the CEO and ideally the board of directors on board. You need to have a clear understanding of where employees, what they think about the brand. You need to ask the question, and this is just before you get started, what's in it for employees? If we think about other critical questions that you should ask before you even embark on a program, then we can get into actually, how do you do it?
Yeah. I mean, the first one is, so brand strategy is business strategy. Brand strategy is business strategy. And so just like the way that you might approach business strategy with, what are we trying to do here? What is the growth that we're seeking? Are we trying to grow? If so, are we trying to grow with new customers? Are we trying to grow by increasing, cross-sell within existing customers? Are we trying to go international? So go really big picture, like, what's the growth idea? What's the hunger for growth? And what are our resources for achieving that growth? Like, I would start with that. And then I'd go, okay, who is the archetype of customer who brings us the most value and that we bring the most value? Who's the customer that we want more of? That's your sweet spot audience. And to get to know those people. And I don't mean in the very kind of literal, or I don't mean only what do they think about our product. I would actually spend the vast majority of the time spent getting to know that audience. What is their job like? Why do they even go into this career? What do they do when they're not working? What matters to them? What makes them tick? What keeps them up at night? So that's like the most big picture macro. And then only then coming to, okay, tell me about this problem. Tell me about the nature of the pain you're in, the pain that our company is trying to solve. Before you talk about our company, just tell me what it's like to be trying to solve this problem and what are the repercussions of not solving this problem. And then understand, okay, when you think about trying to solve this problem, what are the various options that you're considering? Hopefully they're going to tell you, they're going to give you a really rich tableau of substitutes, workaround behaviors. Sometimes it's direct competitors, sometimes it's indirect competitors. What is it that they have kind of in their frame of reference? And now you know who your competitors are. And once you know who your competitors are and you know who your customers are, you know what you're positioning against, because brand positioning is about differentiation. Those are almost synonyms. But in order to be different, you need to know what you're different from. With your Gain detergent example, Drew, if they were competing against people not doing laundry, then they would be competing against dirty laundry. But they're not competing against that. They're competing against clean laundry that smells ho-hum. So that's what they position against, is the rest of the laundry category, and they have to stand out in a way versus that. I find that step in this process to be the most underutilized step, that people go so quickly to who are our direct competitors. If you do that too early, then you can be positioning against the wrong thing altogether. And it might actually be a lot easier than you're making it. Especially if you're creating a new category, it might be that your direct competitors are really not your competitors at all. You're competing against other, workaround software products. You're competing against an organizational habit, we have 10 meetings because we have that problem. That might be what you're competing against. And when you know that with clarity, you can show up with a much more genuine and distinctive way of shining for them and winning their hearts.
So many good thoughts. I'm going to put some pins on some of these. First of all, brand strategy is business strategy. One of the things we talk a lot about in CMO huddles is when you're having business conversations, you have everybody's attention. When you have brand conversations, everybody's rolling their eyes. So business strategy equals brand strategy. So we're really talking about business strategy. And when we talk about business strategy, we're talking about positioning against somebody, right? And the liberation of having an enemy is really helpful, because then you can focus. And it's one of the powers of being a challenger brand. But I'm reminded of a couple of things. One, a statement that I sort of share in my book, which is an old packaged goods one: to convince blank to use blank instead of blank because of blank. The instead of blank, you just put a lot of emphasis on the frame of reference right there. And you don't have, it can be a very interesting, it could be inaction. They could be doing nothing, but it's really, that's where some interesting dynamics come in that you can find some sweet spots. So, okay, we're running out of time. There's a couple of things that you and I've talked about. First of all, I'm just going to state this, which is I see a lot of times people try to do a brand positioning in 3 months. Can you talk about quickly sort of length of time to do this right in your experience?
Yeah. So if you're starting from a point, so when my company does a brand strategy, it's a 9-week process. We're starting assuming that there are already insights that we can leverage about the customer. Doing original research can take a while. So there's a large span of a brand strategy. Pepsi took 2 years to do theirs. I think that you could do a brand strategy in an afternoon, and it would be better than the vast majority of your competitors' brand strategies. Like, kind of back to just do it. Like, don't try to do it perfect, just do it. For me, what I have found is 2 months is a good amount of time for some incubation of ideas and to kind of let various ideas sit. I find that to be optimal. I really like that. And also not to indulge the idea that, okay, we got to do a ton of customer research here so that we're starting with something good. Oftentimes, especially, oh my gosh, with B2B, your salespeople are already experts on your customers, and you probably know your customers better than most B2C companies know about their consumers. So if you're B2C, you oftentimes have to do original research because you don't talk to your consumers directly. Don't get caught up in, we got to do a lot of qualitative research, because that's when brand exercises become really lengthy, is when there's a lot of original research being done that really doesn't have to be done. A little bit goes a long way, I find.
So, okay, let's wrap this up, Lindsay, with 2 do's and a don't for the CMOs who are embarking on a business strategy, revisiting their business strategy journey.
2 do's and a don't. Okay.
Yes.
Number 1, position this to your CEO as a business strategy. And if you want, you have my blessing to not call it a brand strategy. If it means that the CEO will feel more engaged, call it a positioning strategy. Call it a business strategy. But if you want to get the most from it, make sure that it's not a marketing campaign. It actually is an overarching business strategy. And number 2, don't pick something too safe. Safe is actually ultimately expensive because it requires a lot of cognitive calories from your audience. Pick something sharp and bold, and your customer will remember it, and it will be a much higher ROI unfolding. My don't is, I've said this before, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is something that can take 2 years to do, and it's something that can take an afternoon to do. Do it. Don't feel like you need to do something like the CPG companies do that take hours every day for years. Let it happen and really hold your feet to the fire that you're doing it. And you can certainly, if you get more money later, you can come back and you can kind of sharpen it up, but don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
I love it. So many great tips. Lindsay Pedersen, thank you so much. How do people find you?
Sure. Oh, this has been such a fun conversation, Drew. Okay, so people can find me. My business's website is ironcladbrandstrategy.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, huddlers, for joining us. All right. Well, if you've enjoyed this episode, I would encourage you to write a review, share it with a friend, give us a 5-star rating, any other things, or send me a note and just say, hey, Drew, love the episode. We really appreciate your feedback. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.